Only hours after you arrived back from destroying the nest of spiders, you received a message from your commanding officer. Contact has been lost with the beacon tower of Torvarden, and it is presumed to have been overrun. You are commanded to round up what men you can and proceed with all swiftness to Torvarden to ascertain the truth. If the tower has fallen, learn what enemy forces now occupy it and harass or eliminate them as opportunity presents. Scenario 1. The Bridge Guards. As you make your way towards Torvarden, the gentle rolling hills slowly give way to rocky plains, and finally into the boulder-filled maze known locally as the Scree. It is a barren, unnerving place, a perfect site for an ambush as the large rocks cut lines of sight down to just a few yards in most places. Proceeding cautiously, you eventually hear the Enfell River, which you must cross to reach Torvarden. As you approach, however, you hear other noises as well, nearly drowned out by the river. Voices of some inhuman type. Climbing to the top of a large boulder, you get a clear view down to the river. There, standing astride the old wooden bridge, is a group of goblins, a gathering of wicked-looking men, and a gigantic brute in shining green armour. Judging by the large cooking pot they have set up over the river, these villains are camped here, likely to guard the bridge. The only other place to cross the Enfell River is a ford, in sight of the bridge, otherwise it will take at least half a day to reach another crossing. There is nothing for it. The guards will have to be eliminated as quickly and quietly as possible.
Hey everybody, welcome to Always Board, Never Boring. We are playing Rangers of Shadow Deep. We're actually beginning a brand new mission called the Beacon Tower, and this is Scenario 1, The Bridge Guards. In this particular scenario, our group of plucky adventurers have to make their way across the board, and really we're trying to get at least one of our characters off of the far side of the board, on the other side of the river that you can see there. But of course, that means making our way past a number of guards. The way this scenario is set up, you're supposed to use gnolls, but I don't have any gnolls. When I've played the scenario before, I have used orcs, but my orcs aren't painted up. And as I wanted to use painted miniatures, we're using a little bit of a grab bag of enemies here. We have goblins from The Hobbit standing in as our regular gnolls. We have some Bretonnian peasants to act as our gnoll archers. We can assume they are either evil men who have taken up arms against the forces of good, or else they are poor souls who have been forced to do this against their will. And then leading them all, we have, instead of a gnoll sergeant, Slambo, mighty Slambo there standing on the bridge. Facing these deadly adversaries, we have, of course, Tsubasa the Ronin down here, with his faithful companion Guinevere. And then we have the magical siblings, Hansel and Gretel, with their burly bodyguard Johan. The group is fully recovered from its confrontation with giant spiders in the infected trees, and the only thing of particular note about the party is that Hansel is now carrying a magic sword, which Johan found in the last scenario and has kindly gifted to him, as Hansel has shown himself to be willing to get stuck into the action. In this particular scenario, we do have the drop on the villains. We are sneaking into the territory and they don't know we're there. And the scenario does suggest lots of covering terrain. So you can see I've thrown out a lot of ruins and trees onto the board. The way I'm using the trees is slightly abstracted. If line of sight cuts across the base of the trees, then line of sight is blocked completely. If a model is standing within the base of the trees, then you can see that model, but it is in heavy cover. The bases of the trees also act as difficult terrain. The two sets of ruins will of course provide blocking terrain where the ruins stand. The actual bases of the ruins do not block line of sight, but they also count as difficult terrain. Other than that, we have a few elements of scatter terrain for a little bit more cover. We have some gravestones and some statues. We have a little guardhouse over here by the bridge, which spans the river. And then we have a small camp up in the corner there, where there is a treasure chest and a clue token that we would like to explore. The small area of the river, where there is a little island, that is also a ford. We can use that to make our way across the river if the bridge is too well defended. Anything else of note, we will cover it as we go. The final thing we have to do before taking our first turn is we have to pick one of our heroes to make a navigation roll with a target value of 12. If we are successful with that roll, we can move 3 of our models up to 6 inches. So we will do that now, and we're going to pick Tsubasa to do the navigation roll because he gets +2 on navigation checks. He's rolled an 11, with his +2 that's 13, more than enough, so I get to pick 3 models to move. And of course, we want to get as far advanced as possible, but we do not want to get seen at the moment, because while we remain in cover, while we remain in a situation where the enemy don't know we're here, we will get an advantage on all of our attack rolls. And the alarm will only be raised if an enemy takes damage in line of sight to another enemy, or if an enemy begins an activation with one of my characters in line of sight. So our heroes have advanced there, hugging the tree line. We now begin the first turn, and one of the special rules for this scenario is that at the start of each turn, we can make a stealth check with a target value of 8. If we are successful, we can move one of the enemy models up to 6 inches in a direction of our choice. Again, Tsubasa is going to take this roll because he gets +2 to any stealth checks he makes. And he's rolled a 10 there, so that is a success. And really what we would like to do is move one of the archers a little bit further down the board so that he's isolated from his companions and we are better able to remove some of the threats from the board. So let's move the guard standing next to the guardhouse. He's wandered off into the woods there to relieve himself. We now start turn 1 with our ranger phase, and I can move my ranger and up to 2 other models. So Tsubasa and Guinevere, they're going to advance up as far as they can without getting into line of sight. I can move one other character. I'm going to move Hansel. He's going to do a double move. When you do a double move, you spend your first action moving, and then your second action you can move up to half of your movement value again. That's going to give him a run of 9 inches, so he can catch up with everyone. With that done, it's time for the enemies to activate. They will activate in health order, so first the sergeant will activate, and then all of the other enemies have the same health, so we will roll randomly to figure out which one moves each time. And because they don't know we're here, they're just going to be moving in random directions at the moment. So I have this little token, which I will be flipping for each model. Because that's going to take a little while, I'm just going to do this with cuts in the edit to speed things up. All of our enemies have moved. A few things to note about movement. When you flip randomly, they will not move into the river, so they will stop at the river. And also, I'm just moving them in a straight line as far as they will go. So sometimes that means they haven't moved 6 inches, they've only moved a small amount of that. The most important thing is that the archer that we moved at the start of the turn managed to move exactly through the trees where I didn't want him to go, and he has caught line of sight of Tsubasa. So with all of the other movements done, that archer is now going to take a shot at Tsubasa with his second action. And it should be noted this isn't going to raise the alarm at this time, because you will only raise the alarm if an enemy starts its activation with a hero in line of sight. This guy's basically just wandered around the corner, having relieved himself in the trees, and he's been caught by surprise a little bit. To resolve this shoot action, the archer will roll a dice and add his shoot value of 2. However, he has moved this turn, so it is a hurried shot, and he gets -1 to the dice roll. To defend himself, Tsubasa will roll against his fight value, which means he will get +3 on his dice roll. And Tsubasa there has rolled a 20, which is incredibly lucky because the archer rolled a 19, which would have been a huge amount of damage on Tsubasa on the very first turn. However, Tsubasa dodges the attack, and that ends the creature activation. I now get to move my remaining 2 characters, and we have a situation here. At the moment, that archer has spotted Tsubasa, but nobody else has got eyes on Tsubasa. If we can kill that archer, either in this turn or in our ranger phase next turn, the alarm will not be raised. So we'll start by advancing Johan up as much as possible. I've marched Johan through the trees around Hansel. I could have actually made it into base contact with the archer and been in a position to lend Johan's weight to the attack next turn. However, I am hoping that I can win the stealth roll at the beginning of the next turn, and I can get that archer to come deeper into the woods where we can murderlate him, safe from prying eyes. In the meantime, Gretel is going to move 6 inches, And as she hunkers down behind that gravestone, she's going to use her second action to summon her Bird of Light, which is her one use per game magic spell that will summon a little birdie to help me. We're now at the end of the first turn. In this scenario, we draw an event on every odd numbered round, so as this is turn 1, we do draw an event. We have drawn event number 2. And this is incredibly helpful for us because a heavy rain starts to fall. All line of sight is reduced to 12 inches and all shooting attacks are at -2. And that effect will remain in play for the rest of the game. Finally, we place our Bird of Light next to Gretel, and that bird will now act as an additional companion for me. It is the beginning of a new turn, and Tsubasa is going to make his stealth check. He's rolled a 16, which is fantastic because that is successful. Our lone archer clearly panics. He had advanced into the tree line. He had seen a shadow moving amongst the trees. He had fired off a single shot and hit nothing. So now he's going to advance further into the trees to find out whether he actually saw an approaching target or whether it was just a trick of the light. However, as he advances into the trees, he is going to snap into combat with Johan. You can imagine this guy wandering into the trees and a huge gauntleted hand reaching out and grabbing him by the collar, and this archer's day is about to get a lot worse. Now the intention here at the beginning of our turn is to absolutely murder this archer, which means we want to get as many bodies as we can into contact with him. We're going to group activate Tsubasa and Guinevere. Tsubasa is now going to make an attack. We still have advantage on our attack rolls because the alarm has not been raised yet by this rather foolish guard. So we have a lot of things going our way here. Tsubasa is fight +3 as standard. He's getting an additional +4 for the element of surprise, making it +7. He's then also getting an additional +4 from having Guinevere and Johan in the fight with him. So that is a +11 on our dice roll. The archer gets fight +1. Rather annoyingly, Tsubasa has only rolled a 5 there. Fortunately, the archer also rolled very poorly. We are going to win the fight. Our fight total is that bonus of 11 plus the 5 we rolled for a total of 16. And because I'm using my two-handed katana, that becomes 18 for damage. However, the archer has an armor class of 11, which means we inflict 7 wounds and we needed to inflict 10 to kill him. I'm going to use these dice to remind us of the number of wounds that the archer has taken. And now Guinevere is going to attack. Guinevere does not get any bonus from her inherent fight value, but she is still getting +8 from having 2 companions in the fight with her and the element of surprise. And of course the archer is getting +1 on his fight roll. We have rolled a 13, the archer has rolled a 15, so again, it's a bad dice roll from our perspective, but the bonuses that we are getting from surprise and from outnumbering the opponent does mean that we have successfully defeated the archer. With our +8 on the fight roll, we have actually rolled a total of 21, take off the armor class of 11, that is 10 wounds, that is what Tsubasa needed to do, but thankfully Guinevere has finished the task and our archer is removed from play. Well done Guinevere, good job. I have 1 activation left and it's hard to know what to do really. I want to keep out of line of sight as much as possible. I think for now I'm just going to move up Gretel so she's not right at the back, but I'm not going to advance her over with the others. I think we're going to try and do a little bit of a pincer move, I think. Maybe try and advance round from 2 flanks. So I'm just going to move her there for now. She is hugging the tree line, well hidden from everybody. We had a moment, but we have managed to kill the only guard that saw us, so we will not be raising the alarm this turn, at least not for now. But it is the creature phase, so they are all going to aimlessly wander around a bit. So all of our enemies have moved, and there are a few things of note. First of all, our sergeant has obviously decided to do his patrol because he has moved well off of the bridge now and is wandering through the trees. We need to make sure that he doesn't get eyes on Gretel at any point. The other thing of interest is there was a goblin just behind this tree here. He actually ambled out around here and happened to spot Guinevere. Maybe he heard a ruckus in the forest when we took out that archer, but he has now seen Guinevere. He has raced forwards as far as he can. He used a second action to get closer, and he's coming into the woods to explore. We know how well that worked out for his companion. Let's hope we can have similar success with him. It's now time to move our remaining characters, and what we're going to do here is we're going to bundle this goblin. We have 3 things that can get into base contact with him, but only one of them will actually be able to fight. We can move up Hansel so that he's in base contact, we can fly the bird up so the bird is in base contact, and then we can move Johan up. We have 3 characters that can get into base contact with this goblin. First of all, Johan is going to do a double move, so he's not going to be able to attack, but he will be able to get through the woods, so he will be able to assist with everybody else who comes into attack. And he's precariously balanced. We have some wobbly model syndrome, but he's not able to attack. That's fine. I wouldn't want to attack with him anyway. Next, we're going to fly up our bird, and our bird is going to fly into base contact with the goblin as well. And then Johan has just enough movement to get into base contact with that goblin and hit him with his girt big sword. So there we go, and you will notice I have just moved one of the trees slightly to one side because I couldn't get all the models to stand up because of the bases and the positioning of them, so that tree will get shunted back into position once this combat has been resolved. So Johan attacks. Johan gets +4 as standard to his fight roll. He then gets +4 for the element of surprise. He then gets +4 from having 2 allies in play. So he's at +12 on this dice roll at the moment, and the goblin is at +1. And we can see that Johan has rolled a 12 there, more than enough to defeat the dice roll of 5. With all of our fight modifiers, it means we've scored 24. Additionally, Johan has a massive sword that does +2 damage, so we've actually scored damage of 26 there. Take off the armor class of 11 for the goblins, and we have easily done enough damage to smash this goblin to pieces. If you go down to the woods today, a huge bloke with a sword is going to cut your head off. I've removed the goblin from play, I have pushed the tree back into position, and I've slightly repositioned my models so they're not going to keep falling over. And that finishes this turn. The only problem we have now is that we are slightly exposed. The one thing I should have done at the end of the bird's activation, I was supposed to roll to see if it disappeared. So I'm going to do that now. Even if the bird does disappear, it only would have been a difference of -2 on the fight roll that we just did, and Johan still would have easily killed the enemy. And as it turns out, I rolled a 4, so the bird sticks around anyway. And that's the end of the turn. We do not have an event phase this time, because we are on an even numbered turn. We're going to go straight into turn 3. It's a new turn, and Tsubasa is going to roll for stealth. Unfortunately, he rolls a 1 this time, so we don't get to move any of the enemies on the board. That is not ideal. I really wanted to move this guy over here. I wanted to move him right up behind this wall so that he wouldn't see anything that was about to happen. Unfortunately, with the positioning of everything on the board, we are running out of places to hide. We are, of course, still in a deluge of rain, which means these enemies can only see up to 12 inches, but that's really only protecting us from the goblins on the far side of the bridge. I think we may be getting to the situation where we may lose the element of surprise very soon. For now, we're going to activate Johan, Hansel, and Tsubasa, just to reposition them so that they are not so exposed. Johan is going to march through the trees and take up position behind that statue. It's like trying to hide an elephant. Hansel is working on the grounds that discretion is sometimes the better part of valor. He's going to go and try and meet up with his sister, I think. He's going to backpedal somewhat. And Tsubasa is going to scurry around the tree line. No combat, but we are all still hidden at the moment, and it is time to activate the enemies. All of the enemies have moved, and it's a mixture of good and bad, really. The sergeant has wandered off over here into the ruins. He probably wants to go and have a chat with his archer over here and ask him why he has leaned against the wall for the entire game so far. The goblin, on the other side of the river, has advanced as far as he can to the water's edge and is peering through the rain to try and see what is going on the other side, because he is hearing the distant sounds of swords. There is now a goblin just here behind this tree, and an archer just behind this tree, ready to play peekaboo with Johan. But the biggest issue is just over here, this archer has crept around the ruins and he has caught sight of our little bird. He is within the 12 inches range, so he is going to take a shot at it. However, it's -2 because of the rain and -1 because he has moved. So his roll will be at -1 and the bird's roll will be at +0. He's rolled a 13, which goes to a 12. The bird has rolled an 18, so the bird successfully darted out of the way of the arrow. That completes our enemy activations. And I think our little bird is going to retaliate. We are getting into a position now where we may lose the element of surprise shortly, probably next round, so let's just take full advantage of it. The bird is going to fly across the board and attack this archer. The bird is +4 to the archer's +1. The bird rolls a 3, the archer rolls a 2. The bird does win, but it's not good enough to actually cause any damage. And now we have to roll to see if the bird disappears. If it does disappear, that's not the worst thing in the world because it means the alarm will not be raised next turn. Unfortunately, the bird is going to stick around, which means it's time for Plan B, and Plan B is Guinevere the Panther. With her movement of 8, she can easily get into base contact with that archer, and Guinevere will be getting +6 to her dice roll. She scores a 10. She has successfully hit the archer and does penetrate the archer's armor of 11. However, only does 5 points of damage. Still 5 points of health left on that archer. Next up, we have to activate Gretel. Gretel is, of course, going to move as close to Johan as possible. She likes to stick close to him. And that is it for my activations. It is time to draw an event card. We have drawn event card 3. A new goblin arrives in the fray. Place one goblin fighter at the center point of the table, then roll a random direction and move the goblin 8 inches in that direction. So the center point of the table is pretty much in line with that little house, just round about there. And I'm going to flip my token. And that means we're going to come down in this direction. That's not too bad. That puts him quite close to Tsubasa. He was clearly lurking in the forest. We begin the new turn with our stealth roll as always, because we are still, against all the odds, hidden. And we have rolled a natty 20. Not the best time to roll one. You tend to want to roll those when you're trying to beat a goblin to death with a shovel. But I'll take it, because I'm actually going to move the goblin that has just arrived on the board. I am going to move him so that Tsubasa can deal with him quietly. So he's just wandered out of the woods, pulling his pants up, and has suddenly gone, hold on a minute. What are all these people doing here? What I would really have liked to have done was move him so that he was in base contact with Johan and Gretel, and then Tsubasa could have come in and got a massive advantage on his attack rolls. But although it says that you can move a model 6 inches, I'm working on the basis they still mean you to apply difficult terrain, that sort of thing. And because he was in the woods, he actually was only able to move 3 inches instead of 6. Now I'm in a bit of a pickle here because I cannot group activate anyone with Tsubasa, which is going to make it more difficult to get the drop on this goblin. And also, of course, we have Guinevere dealing with an archer up at the top end of the board, and if she doesn't kill that archer before the creature phase, I will lose my attack bonus for being hidden. But what I'm going to do this turn, I'm going to activate Guinevere. That's going to decide what I do for the rest of the turn, I think. So Guinevere attacks. She's still getting +6 at the moment. And that is massive. She has rolled a 19 with her +6. That's 25. That is inflicting more than enough damage to kill that archer. And that has really got me out of a bind, because what I was going to have to do, if she failed that roll, I was going to activate Hansel, and Hansel was going to transpose Johan into the place where the bird was so that Johan could finish the job there, and then I would have been relying on Tsubasa to kill the other goblins single-handedly. As it is, I can now get Johan and Tsubasa to team up on this other goblin together. This is actually probably Guinevere's best performance to date. She usually gets beaten up quite badly. She of course still gets a move action. She can move up to 8 inches. We will scurry back around the tree line. Like so. Crisis averted for now. Next, we will activate Johan. Johan is going to barrel into this goblin, see if he can lay down plenty of damage before Tsubasa comes in and finishes it off. We need a big hit here. We are getting +4 fight because Johan is a beast, and then we're getting an additional +4 fight for our stealthiness. We have rolled a 14 and the goblin rolled a 19. Luckily, we get that +8 to our fight roll, which actually takes us up to 22, which means we do win. That gets converted into damage. We get an additional +2 damage because we are using our big sword. That gives us a total of 24, more than enough to absolutely pulverize this goblin. Johan is also having a much better game than he normally does. Things are going well. Now we just have Tsubasa left to move, and he doesn't have anything to do now. I thought he was going to have to do most of the heavy lifting in this round, but his companions came good. So he's just going to move up behind the statue where Johan was before. We will surround Gretel with protective bodies. That's a double move through the woods, and that ends my activation. It's the creature phase, and somehow we are still hidden. The only one of my characters who could possibly have been seen is the bird, but the goblins are either too far away on the other side of the river, or this goblin's view is obscured by the ruins, and there is an archer behind this tree here, but his view is blocked by the ruins as well, so we're all good. Let's randomly move some baddies. Our enemies have moved, and I've said it before, but one of the things I really love about Rangers of Shadowdeep is just how a narrative seems to emerge from everything that happens. Some little fun things have happened on the tabletop. First of all, the goblin who had reached the edge of the river and looked out across it and then couldn't see anything because of the rain, he's turned around and wandered back over to the table, probably having something to eat, but now his companion has taken his place on the lookout point. Meanwhile, our sergeant over here has continued to amble over towards that archer, and that archer obviously suddenly felt like he needed to do something and finally was motivated to begin his patrol and is trudging through the difficult terrain. Get back to work. There was a goblin behind this forest here. He obviously heard the scream of his little friend here because he immediately cut through the trees, and once he was in the trees, obviously the trees are no longer blocking his line of sight because the way I've worked out the rules is that you have to have the whole base of the tree stand between you and the target for line of sight to be blocked. So he saw Johan standing over the body of his friend and then charged forwards as far as he could. So he is now aware of my presence, so I will have to deal with him next turn. Finally, the archer that was behind this tree here obviously heard the scuffle going on over here with Guinevere. He marched off to the ruins to see what was going on, but got to here and then caught sight of Tsubasa tucked away behind this statue. So he is now going to fire a shot at Tsubasa. Normally he would be at shoot +2, but because of the rain and because he moved, he's actually at shoot -1. Tsubasa is rolling against his fight value, which is +3. And because there are only 2 archers left on the board and one of them is quite a way out of the way, I'm actually going to use my special ability here. I have a special dive for cover ability, which I have to specify I'm going to use before I roll any dice. It will give me +10 fight against a shooting attack. So there we go, I rolled a 4. Under normal circumstances, that would have been a fail, but because I did my dive for cover, I get to add +10 to that, as well as the +3 for my fight, which means I do successfully dodge the arrow. The downside is, of course, the archer rolled very poorly anyway. He only rolled a 9. That wouldn't actually have been enough to penetrate my armor anyway. So really, I didn't need to use the special ability, but it was better to be safe than sorry. I now get to activate the rest of my models, and we're going to start with the bird, who is going to fly across and have a little peck at that archer. I'm not really expecting to do much damage here. I'm getting +4 on my dice roll compared to +1 for the archer, but if I can chip away a couple of wounds, might as well. The bird might vanish at the end of this activation for all we know. Well, the bird is definitely going to vanish after this activation because that archer just turns around and bats it straight out of the sky. Raptors have an armor class of 14, but they only have a single wound, so that little bird vanishes in a puff of magical energy. Next up we have Hansel. Hansel wants to move through the trees to get within 3 inches of Tsubasa
for a group activation next round. Finally, Gretel is just going to move around to try and get out of the way of all of the scuffles. And that completes the turn. We don't have an event card this time because we're on an even numbered turn, so we go straight into our next phase. And amazingly, I still get to roll for stealth. That's an 11, that is a success, so I get to move a goblin. And I see no reason why this goblin here, having seen Johan murder his friend, wouldn't charge into the fray and put himself in a bit of a predicament. So we're going to move him so he is up in base contact with Johan and Tsubasa. We now start our ranger phase. I'm going to activate Johan first. Johan is +4 for being a big lad, +4 for stealth, +2 for having Tsubasa in the fight with him. So we're rolling +10 on this. And that is a natural 20, which is pretty amazing because the goblin rolled incredibly well as well, getting an 18. So that 20, we add our 10 to get 30. We add +2 because of our big sword, getting us to 32. We then add an additional 5 points of damage because it was a critical hit. And I think it's safe to say this very angry goblin probably acted foolishly because he is just a red smear on the ground now. And Johan continues to be an absolute boss in this game. Johan does still have a movement, which he might as well take because we do still need to get across this bridge at some point. We are now going to do a group activation with Tsubasa and Hansel, and they are both going to charge in to this archer in the ruins. And we are very lucky there because we are just 1 inch out of view of that little goblin on the other side of the river. We will do Tsubasa's attack first. He's not happy about this archer taking a shot at him. So he is +3 fight, then an additional 2 for having Hansel with him, and then an additional 4 for the stealth. So that's giving us +9 on this roll. And we've rolled a 17, again, another massive hit. That is 26. When converted into damage, that goes to 28 because we are using a double-handed sword, and that is more than enough to kill this archer too. I knew it was a good idea to bring out the dice tray. Everything's going my way. And Johan is now left with a second activation to take, so he might as well move. But of course, he can only move 3 inches now. Johan, Tsubasa and Hansel have all activated, so it is now the creature phase, and we are still hidden. And there we have another round of aimless moving about for some of the most hapless guards I've ever seen. All of them must be going, "What was that? Must have been the wind." As you can see, the goblins on the other side of the river, they keep hearing the clashing of swords and the screams of the dying, and they have decided to wander over to the bridge. Maybe they'll pop across and have a look and see what's going on. Meanwhile, the sergeant, having chastised the archer over here, is ambling back over to the bridge as well. The archer in question has decided to wander down behind here, over behind these ruins. I think at this point he is probably out of the game unless he suddenly realizes that something bad is happening at the other side of the board. The most important thing of note is that the goblin on the bridge is just outside of 12 inches from Johan there, so Johan was nearly spotted. At this point we only have Gretel and Guinevere to move, so I think we're just going to move Gretel up next to the house. She'll still be hidden, and everyone else is relatively close to her, and we will bring Guinevere around through the trees. That completes the activations, so it is time to draw an event card. Event card 6. The event reads, place a large vulture on the table anywhere along the hero's starting table edge. During the creature phase, each turn, this vulture will move 6 inches directly across the table. It will not force combat or otherwise willingly deviate from this course. Only heroes that can fly can move into combat with the vulture. If this vulture takes damage within line of sight of the gnolls, it raises the alarm. Make a note if the vulture manages to exit the other side of the table before the end of the scenario. Now, I don't have a vulture miniature, but what I do have is this cute anvil-wrought raptor, which I really like because it reminds me of the owl from Clash of the Titans. So we're going to assume that the enemies have worked out how to make little mechanical birds and other constructs, And this bird is going to fly across the table in place of a vulture. And we will pop him just there. I don't have any archers on my team, which makes this bird a bit of a problem. The only character who can really engage it in combat is Tsubasa, who has some throwing kunai. It is the start of a new ranger phase, nevertheless. And amazingly, we roll for stealth. Unfortunately, just a 2 this time, so we don't get to move anybody. Okay, I think it's time to play our hand. The time for stealth is at an end. We need to make a push now to get across the bridge. So I'm going to activate Tsubasa, Johan, and Guinevere, and we are going to set ourselves up to lure the goblins into a trap. First, Tsubasa will move up next to Gretel. Johan will go and stand next to Tsubasa to kite the goblins. And Guinevere is going to make her way to the ford. So Guinevere has darted at full speed into the ford. Interestingly, the water in the ford is freezing cold. As soon as you enter the water, you have to end your current activation anyway, but she had just enough to get in there, which was really, really lucky. Thankfully, when she does a double move, she gets 12 inches of movement, so that worked in her favour. But of course, it is now the creature phase, and the creatures raise the alarm. Uh-oh. First of all, even though the alarm is raised, the sergeant still can't see anyone. So he is still going to bumble around randomly. And in fact, he bumbles off in completely the wrong direction. Ridiculously, that has placed him directly behind that piece of ruins, which means he still doesn't have line of sight to any of my characters. Next, his little archer buddy down here, he will randomly move. And he obviously wants to go and have a word with the boss. This is a failure of middle management. But of course, our goblins on the other side of the bridge, they know what's going on. They can both see enemies and they will move towards the closest enemy. And you will see now why I split Guinevere off the other way, because Guinevere will kite the first goblin towards her, whilst Johan will kite the second goblin towards him. I am nothing if not a tactical genius. The first goblin sees the panther and, in a display of complete foolishness, chucks himself into the freezing cold waters of the ford. Meanwhile, our second goblin, in a similar act of foolishness, will charge into combat. It takes him 2 actions to get into base contact with Johan, which means that's it for him. He doesn't actually get to make an attack this turn. Finally, our little bird down here will move 6 inches straight ahead. We have Hansel and Gretel left to activate. Gretel is actually going to sneak around the back of the house, climb up onto the bridge, and start making her way to the other side. Once we're across the bridge, life gets easier. To do this, she will have to climb up the side of the bridge, and that counts as double movement. Our Lady of Light has taken the bridge. Hansel needs to run as fast as he can. And now he has a sneaky plan up his sleeve, because he is going to cast a spell. The spell he is going to cast is Transpose, which allows me to instantly switch the position of any 2 of my characters. And he's going to switch positions with Guinevere. He's going to teleport himself into the ford and teleport the panther back onto dry land. And this is going to set me up for another cunning trick next turn. That completes all my activations and indeed completes the round. We go into turn 7, and although the alarm has been raised, things are looking okay. Obviously, this round we are going to group activate with Johan and Tsubasa. Hopefully we will decimate this goblin on the bridge, even though we no longer have the element of surprise. But before we do that, we are going to activate Hansel. And Hansel is going to score me some experience points. He's going to immediately cast Teleport. So the goblin is bearing down on him, splashing through the water, knife drawn, ready for the kill. Hansel casts Teleport. He is allowed to move immediately 9 inches. He is well within 9 inches of the top end of the board. He is teleporting himself off the board. He is scoring me 15 experience points and ensuring that I have completed my main objective for this mission. Hansel, you legend. Nice to see him being very useful without getting caught up in spiders' webs, activating booby traps, or being ambushed by zombies. Next up, as I said, group activation with Tsubasa and Johan. So Tsubasa is going to move into combat with this goblin, and we will have Johan make the first strike.
Johan gets +4 fight as standard. He gets an additional +2 for the presence of Tsubasa. Unfortunately, we do not get our +4 for stealth anymore. And annoyingly, it's a bad roll for Johan. Johan rolls a 6. He adds his 6 bonus, giving him a total of 12. The goblin rolled 13 plus 1 is 14, so the goblin wins the fight. And furthermore, the goblin manages to get through Johan's armor class of 12 to inflict 2 wounds. Not ideal, Johan. However, Tsubasa is here to help. Tsubasa gets +3 fight, +2 from the presence of Johan. Oh, and look at that. The goblin rolled a 19, but Tsubasa rolled an 18. When we add Tsubasa's bonuses in, that's a total of 23. When we convert that to damage, we add an additional 2 for his sword for a total of 25. He absolutely murders that goblin. This is how it's done, Johan. Watch and learn. That's me out of activations, though. It's time to activate the villains. So first of all, we have to activate our sergeant over here. Randomly, of course, because he still hasn't got a clue what's going on. And he continues to not have a clue what's going on by walking straight into the ruins. He basically stays where he is this turn. Now for the archer. And the archer also doesn't move. They're obviously deep in conversation. Did you hear that? What? Did you hear that noise? What noise? The sounds of all of our friends being murdered in the woods. Nah, didn't hear anything. Finally, this goblin over in the ford, he obviously still has line of sight on Gretel, so he will splash towards Gretel. And he's going to do that by taking the shortest route across the ford and then moving along the bank. As the ford is classed as shallow water, it is difficult terrain, which means he's at half move. Finally, our vulture moves 6 inches. Gretel is going to move across the bridge, getting ready to ransack the goblin's camp next turn. And Guinevere is going to start moving across the bridge as well, by dashing around behind the house, clambering up onto the bridge that way. That is the end of the activations, but we do have to draw an event card. We have drawn event card number 5. There is a booby trap. Pick one random hero. That figure must make either a traps roll with a target value of 7 or a perception roll with a target value of 7. If the figure fails, make an immediate +1 attack against the figure. If this attack does any damage, the alarm is raised. Okay, I will roll a d12 to randomize who takes it. It will be 1 to 3 for Tsubasa, 4 to 6 for Johan, 7 to 9 for Guinevere, 10 to 12 for Gretel. It's an 8. That's the worst result possible. It's Guinevere. Guinevere, somehow, her cat senses fail her and she steps on a booby trap. Okay, so first of all, we have to make our perception roll. Needing a target number of 7. We get no modifiers for this at all. And we've rolled an 8. That's unbelievable. It looks like our cat instincts did not fail us after all. We spotted the trap and we avoid it. That's incredible. Guinevere only has an armor class of 10 and she only has a health of 6. So taking an attack with a +1 modifier, there was a very good chance that if she had fallen into that booby trap, she would have been seriously hurt, maybe even killed. We start the next turn with our ranger phase. And I think the first thing we're going to have to do is Tsubasa is going to have to throw a kunai at that bird. He is within the 8-inch range, which is good. And he hasn't moved, which means there's no modifier for a quick shot. However, we are still fighting in the rain, and my shoot is only +1 normally, so I'm making this roll at -1. I've rolled a 15. That is annoying, because I'm at -1, which means it's a 14, which means I have been successful. However, the bird's armor class is 14, which means I do not penetrate the armor. So now Tsubasa is going to make a move action to get as far across the bridge as possible. Johan will follow him, and Guinevere will just get out of the way. That's it, it's time to randomly activate my sergeant. And he wanders off to go and have a look over the wall. He really is completely useless. And our remaining archer? Clearly he wants to go and have a look as well. Our last goblin will charge into combat with Johan. However, because he's got to clamber up the side of the bridge, it is going to take him 2 actions to get there. Separating those goblins really worked in my favour. But now we move
our little mechanical bird. Okay, it's time to activate Gretel. She's going to start by moving adjacent to the clue token. That will end her movement action, but I will then roll on a clue table to see what she has found. We roll the dice. We've rolled a 1. We have found a scroll. You find a scroll covered in some ancient script. After the scenario, pick one figure to make an ancient lore roll with a target value of 8. If successful, the figure recognizes it as orders for the goblins' deployment, including 2 other guard posts nearby. For her second action, she's going to move up to the treasure chest. But of course, she has no actions left to open it this turn. That ends our activations. There are no events this round, so we are going to go straight into round 9. And at this point, I feel we can probably adjust the camera, as everything good is happening up there. On the start of our ranger phase, obviously the first thing we want to do is get rid of this goblin on the bridge because he is preventing Johan from moving off the board at the moment. So we're going to group activate Tsubasa and Rohan. Tsubasa is going to move into base contact with the goblin. He will attack first, and then if he manages to kill the goblin, Johan will be free to use his second activation to move on. Tsubasa gets +3 as standard, +2 for having Johan with him. And it's a big hit from Tsubasa. He has rolled a 19. We add 5 from our fight bonus for 24. We convert that into damage and add an additional 2 for our double-handed katana. That's 26 points of damage, and that is a single decapitating blow to the last goblin on the board. The number of one-shot kills in this game has been incredible, considering I'm fighting enemies that have an armor class of 11 and 10 wounds each. They should have been a little bit more durable than this. Johan is now free to take a move action. Of course, because it was a group activation, the first activation has to be a move, even though he didn't move. So for his second activation, he's moving half speed. So he really doesn't go very far at all. For my third activation, I'm going to activate Gretel. She's going to spend 1 action to pick up the treasure chest, and then she will use her second action to walk off of the board, securing that treasure for the end of the game. That completes the ranger activation. It is now time for the enemy phase. Now Johan would now normally be in line of sight to the sergeant way over there by the wall. However, it is still lashing with rain and line of sight is restricted to 12 inches. So that sergeant continues to bumble around. He's just walking along the edge of the wall now. He's seen something next door. And our archer? He's following him. I have no idea what these guys are up to anymore. On the one hand, it's been quite nice that they've been over there the whole game, because I haven't had to deal with them. But on the other hand, they would have converted into extra victory points, which would have helped me level up. Regardless, we need to activate our little mechanical birdie. It's just Guinevere left to activate. She's just going to wander off the board as well. We do have to draw an event card, the Ace. A soldier that has escaped the attack on Torvarden appears on the table. Place him anywhere you wish on the small side of the table. This soldier has the same stats as a man-at-arms companion. Treat this soldier as a companion for the rest of the mission, even if that takes your ranger above his normally allowed number of companions. Well, that's fantastic. I've just gained a new ally who will accompany me for the rest of this mission. For this man-at-arms, I think we will use this model. Doesn't seem to be anything special about him. He looks pretty ordinary. I'm sure there is nothing unusual about him at all. And I'm just going to pop him there, and next turn he's just going to wander off the board with me. Fantastic timing on his part. It is the final turn, says the dragon. Now here's the thing, obviously in our ranger phase, we're just going to get our 3 heroes off of the board, and that will effectively end the scenario. However, we would still play to the end of the turn normally, and if that little mechanical bird was a little bit closer to the edge of the table, he would have just snuck off the board and caused trouble for me in the next scenario. However, he is just outside of 6 inches from the board edge, so I don't need to worry too much about him. However, he will score me 3 victory points if I can kill him, and I do have 1 kunai left. So first of all, I'm going to move Johan and the man-at-arms off of the board just to get them safe. And then Tsubasa will take 1 final crack at taking down this vulture before following behind them. Tsubasa draws his final kunai. He's normally shoot +1, but the rain is still lashing down, which means he is at -1 for this roll. He has rolled a 14, that's a miss. However, I may as well, because it is my last action of the round. I'm going to use my special ability Hand of Fate, which grants me a reroll, and I'm going to re-roll that dice. And look at that. That is so annoying. I rolled a 19. Of course, I am at -1 because of the lashing rain. That rain that has served me well as a cover as I've advanced across the board. That rain that has protected me so many times from the enemy. Now, it turns against me and it prevents me from successfully hitting that bird, denying me 3 experience points. Regardless, shaking his head, Tsubasa moves towards the edge of the board, and he is going to use his dash ability, which gives him an extra 2 inches of movement, so he has enough to get off of the board and finish the game. You had a lucky escape, little mechanical bird. However, your little wings do not flap fast enough. I will beat you to the beacon. Now, I could play out the rest of the round, but there's not a lot of point. The bird won't make it off the edge of the table. The sergeant and the archer will probably just amble along the wall a little bit more. Eventually, they're going to notice that everybody else is dead, but I think when they do, they will probably just wander off into the woods and hope that they are never found, because upper management will be wanting a word. And that is that. That is the end of the game, and that is my most successful performance, I think, in Rangers of Shadowdeep to date. Everything went my way. Amazing dice rolls, so many one-shot kills. The lashing rain turning up very early, covering me. In a number of situations, the alarm would have been raised under normal circumstances, but the rain restricting that line of sight really, really helped. And it was only that final push across the bridge where I had to deal with the enemy knowing I was there. It's time to do our end of game wrap up. It's pretty much good news all round. First of all, none of my heroes were taken out of action, which means I don't have to do any injury rolls. The only one who even took a wound was Johan, and he fully recovers his 2 hit points for our next scenario. Second, of course, we have a new friend. This soldier that escaped from Torvarden has decided to escort us. He has the stats of a man-at-arms, and he will remain until he is defeated or until the end of this mission. So hopefully he'll stick around for a couple of scenarios. And that's pretty fantastic because obviously my group doesn't have a huge amount of combat prowess. I have 2 magic users on the team and a panther who is more of a bonus provider than an outright attacker. So having an extra man-at-arms to flail a sword around for me is going to be a big bonus. Next, my ranger picked up some experience points. We get 3 experience points for each archer or goblin we killed. We killed 5 goblins and 3 archers, so that's 24 experience points. We also get 15 experience points for getting at least one of our party off of the board. As it turns out, of course, all of our party got off of the board. Finally, Gretel found a scroll. We now have to attempt to read this scroll by making an ancient lore roll, and anyone in my party can make this roll. I am going to get Tsubasa to do it because Tsubasa gets +2 on his ancient lore tests. Unfortunately, we rolled a 1. Tsubasa learns nothing from this scroll, which means I don't get the 8 experience points for finding it. So not the best game for picking up experience points. I scored a total of 39. When added to the 152 I previously had, that takes me up to 191, putting me just 9 points shy of reaching level 2. If I had managed to kill the mechanical bird and decipher the scroll, I actually would have leveled up, so that is a little bit annoying. The rest of the party don't gain experience points, they gain progression points. As they all survive the scenario, they all get 2 progression points, taking them up to 6 each. Next, we managed to secure a treasure chest, which means we have to roll on the treasure table. And we rolled a 10. We have found a herb or a potion, and it is a 3. A 3 is Fireheart Green. It says a figure that takes this herb receives +1 action on its next activation. But I think probably the best thing to do is to give that to Tsubasa. But that's it. an action-packed battle, and at the end of it we have come out with an extra companion, some special herbs, and a full roster of healthy heroes ready to take on the next challenge. And that is it from me for now. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the playthrough, please consider pressing the like button. If you've really enjoyed the playthrough, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.